with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of Saint Joseph. Today is Testimony Tuesday, where we bring you real, live, first-hand testimonial accounts of the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. Our guest today is Jacinta Robin. She is a full-time pro-life activist with the Center for Bioethical Reform and a cradle Catholic. She's been active in the pro-life movement since she was 17 years old. Her desire is to share a message with the world that a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable, and we share a grim image so long as abortion is a so-called protected right. We're going to bring in Jacinta in just a moment. The website, by the way, for the Center for Bioethical Reform is abortionno.org. That's abortionno.org. It was founded in July of 1990. And the Center for Bioethical Reform is working to establish what they call prenatal justice and the right to life for the preborn, the disabled, the infirm, the aged, and all vulnerable peoples through education and the development of innovative educational resources. CBR's projects include the Genocide Awareness Project, GAP, the Reproductive Choice Campaign, so-called choice in quotes campaign, the Corporate Accountability Project, and the Church Project. CBR also publishes educational resources and conducts seminars to establish the humanity of the preborn and the inhumanity of abortion. CBR operates on the principle that abortion represents an evil so inexpressible that words fail us when attempting to describe its horror. Until abortion is seen, it will never be understood. CBR is strictly nonviolent. They say on their website, we oppose violence against babies and against the abortionists who kill them, just as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sought to create a so-called creative tension to awaken the nation to the horrible injustice of segregation. We too are creating a creative tension to awaken the nation to the horrible injustice of abortion. The work is so very much needed in our time. And again, Jacinta Robin is a full-time pro-life activist with the Center for Bioethical Reform. Jacinta, thank you for being with us today. Are you with us? How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Jim. I really appreciate this. This is an honor.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. So yeah, so great that you're on. All the technical stuff is worked out. Here we go. Come, Holy Spirit. And so we always begin with childhood here on these Testimony Tuesdays. So you can give us some background. What was your early life like? Your family, the culture that you grew up in?
I was raised in a very Catholic home. My dad made sure that we understood the faith backwards and forwards. If ever we were challenged, not so much because one faith should trump another per se, but we are obliged to give an account for why we believe in what we believe. So that was instilled from a very young age. And I've always been interested in morals and morality. And I really like the way the church can back up its principles with logic and reason. And that was at least our moral upbringing at home, which probably spun me in this direction of working in the pro-life movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to follow the sacramental graces, we always like to do that in your early life. So baptized as an infant, I presume, and then first Holy Communion, first penance around second grade, confirmation in high school years. Anything you want to say about receiving any of the sacraments, the sacramental life growing up?
I could not wait to have my first communion. My father is a Haitian immigrant, and so the sacraments were always a huge deal in Haiti, and he basically embellished them for us. I felt like I was getting married to Christ. There was a big to-do. There was a wedding cake. There was just a lot of emphasis on this milestone of being able to receive Christ in the Holy Eucharist, and it developed such an awe in me for the Eucharist and what it stands for, that I knew I could never leave the church. I knew I could never separate myself from the church. because I would not be able to find the Eucharist anywhere else. So that was huge. My confirmation was a big deal as well. I took on the name St. Teresa Little Flower, and I later learned that she was a patron saint of babies. So I thought how appropriate that I would just feel led in this direction with a patron saint that protects little children. So confirmation took place when I was 12. And I've been a cradle Catholic all my life. And after confirmation, I guess it's just the next milestone in life. I haven't quite reached that yet, marriage or holy orders or anything like that. But who knows?
Anything you want to share by way of personal experience to other young people that are out there. It is such a unique time as a young adult, coming of age, as they say, and discerning, right? What does God want from me? Specifically discerning vocation. Am I called to married life and family life? And if so, who am I called to marry, right? That's a pretty specific sort of discernment when you get down into it. Or am I called to religious life in some form? So what advice would you give? Anything from your own personal experience that you'd like to share to maybe other young people who are discerning, going through this as well? Just some tips, I guess, that you have learned along the way.
Sure. I would say get mentors. I did a lot of research when I was a teenager in what it meant to be chaste, what it meant to discern, what it meant to have options in terms of how you wanted to direct your life and orient it towards Christ. And I was very grateful for that because there was just a lot of confusion in general. And this was maybe 15 years ago. So you can imagine how young people must feel now trying to figure out who and what they are at the onset of what's available now to them from both ends. The moral groups and the immoral groups are offering young people a lot right now. But I would say have good examples of what you are considering. So if you're thinking about becoming a wife and a mother, look to your own mother if you had a positive upbringing. Find good moms and ask them what it's like being a mom, and ask them what it's like being a wife. Ask tough questions because they've already lived it. They've experienced it, and they can give you an idea of what life may be like for you and what you may enjoy, what you may not enjoy. But you can make a strong decision if you have good information. If you're considering becoming a nun or sister or going to the priesthood, reach out to good nuns and priests because they have already done the discernment. They've already walked that path. They've already been through all the stress. I spent a good 10 years trying to figure out if I wanted to become a sister or if I wanted to become a mother. I'm not married yet, but I am dating. And it took a lot to get myself comfortable with the idea that I had to settle on one and I had to embrace it wholeheartedly. And there was a lot of prayer involved. There was a lot of visiting of monasteries involved, but that's all part of it. And eventually God has a conversation with you, and it's an honest one. And you kind of have to choose a path, but you don't want to choose a path without having good knowledge and good references and good information.
Yeah, beautifully said. Jacinta Robin is with us. And Jacinta, you seem to me to be a very good example for young people who, as they're discerning their definitive vocation, to make the most of the time that they have. What an opportunity as a young person before entering into religious life or married life. You have a lot more time available than, what you might have once you get into those vocations when there's a lot more responsibility, a lot more entrusted to your care in terms of other people. And you are a full-time pro-life activist, and you've been active in the pro-life movement since you were 17. Can you share a little bit with us about how that came to be? How did that get started for you at such a young age?
Yeah, so I was always interested in morals. I was always interested in philosophy. This was something that we were challenged with. We were asked to discuss frequently in our home growing up. And I realized that just as bedrock and as clear as physics or the core sciences are, such was morality. There was right and there was wrong, whether you liked it or not. And I felt as though the areas where society was failing, it was failing because of a lack of structure and morals. And so when I was 17, I made up my mind that when I became an adult, I would pick a social issue and try to correct it. And I searched and searched and searched, and the issue of abortion called my heart the hardest. And that's the one I dove in head first to fight.
All right, we're going to have more with Jacinta Robin when we get back. You can also check out Jacinta's website, her blog, realitysustained.com. I believe her YouTube channel is also the same name, Reality Sustained. Also, the website for the Center for Bioethical Reform is abortionno.org. When we get back with Jacinta, she'll continue on sharing more from her story and the lessons that we can take away from it. There is so much in this that we need to see. All right, we ought to have that same vision that Jacinta is describing to say, okay, where's the big problems going on? How can I step in and be helpful? We're going to be right back. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Jim Havens, co-founder of the National Men's March to Abolish Abortion and Rally for Personhood. Some truths are self-evident, some rights are unalienable. It is a scientific fact that life begins at conception fertilization. It is a foundational moral truth that we ought not murder innocent human beings. Every human being is a human person with a right to life and the equal protection of law according to the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Yet we have an ongoing daily mass murder of our little preborn brothers and sisters. It's time for all men and women of goodwill to rise up together in the public square and say no more. Come join us in Albany, New York on Saturday, June 3rd. Men, let's go first and gather at 9 a.m. for the Men's March. Women, we need you to join us at 10:45 a.m. for the Rally for Personhood outside of the New York State Capitol. We'll have some great speakers along with terrific opportunities for formation and fellowship before and after. Go to themensmarch.com for all the details. See you in Albany.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
It just really connected me to my faith. I always considered myself 100% Catholic, but didn't really realize that I wasn't fully practicing my faith, so I learned so much through the Station of the Cross and began just getting deeper in my prayers and feeling just so much closer to God and so well versed in learning more about the Bible and more about what actually it means to be Catholic. So it became very, very important to me, and I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it. I make it a regular practice of donating every time they have their fundraising, and just love it and wouldn't want it to ever go away.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Testimony Tuesday with our guest today, Jacinta Robin. She is a full-time pro-life activist with the Center for Bioethical Reform. She's a cradle Catholic. She's been active in the pro-life movement since she was 17. And that's really where we left off. Jacinta, can you explain a little bit more? So you had this moral sense. What a blessing, what a gift. And it was cultivated in your family. And so you had this sense and you had this thought, I want to figure out, I guess, what are the big moral issues out there? And I'm going to pick one. I'm going to dive into it. Why was it pro-life? Why was it the daily ongoing mass murder of the preborn that rose up above the other issues? Why was that the one that grabbed you?
Okay, so there was a bit of a backstory with my falling into working in the pro-life movement even from the age of 17, because at the age of 16, I started dual enrolling. I went to college, and for whatever reason, as a bio major at the time, I was confronted with the issue of the church being opposed to abortion at all stages of development. So as a biology major, I could see that the single-celled organism that was the unborn, at the very early stages of life, was a single cell, or a blastocyst, a clump of cells, as they like to call them. And I said, how could the church be opposed to abortion if in the earliest stages the baby is just a clump of cells? So that was 16, and I wrestled with that question, and I felt at this point in my life, which was the first time ever, I was in opposition with the Catholic Church. And I was like, well, we have a problem here. I love my faith. I love the church. I love the Eucharist. I don't understand why this is our stance, and I don't agree with it. I need to figure this out. So I got online. I had a break at work. I was working as a biology tutor. I had a break, and I got on the computer and I looked up early trimester abortions. And I saw what a second trimester abortion looked like. So the baby was about 12 to 14 weeks. And I couldn't believe how developed it was. It looked like a little human being. The image is just ingrained in my brain. And I saw an arm, on a surgical dish. And I was just like, that's not a clump of cells. And I realized two things. I realized, number one, everybody develops at a different rate. You can have a pair of teenagers with you, going through puberty, and one's a 13-year-old girl and one's a 13-year-old boy. The 13-year-old boy is 6 foot, and the 13-year-old girl is 4 foot 12. So we develop at different rates. And how would I know that a baby is just becoming to look like a human being at 10, 12 weeks? These are all, they're not guesses per se, but they're estimates, and everyone's going to reach certain mile markers at slightly different times. So I may be thinking in my mind a woman would be gestationally appropriate for an abortion because the doctor says she's X amount of weeks. And according to this textbook, her baby should not be so developed as to look like a young baby or feel pain. But nobody knows for sure until they actually do a sonogram or take the baby out to know exactly how developed that baby was. So there was some ambiguity, and I was thinking, if we're dealing with life or death here, if we're dealing with murdering a potential someone, that's the thought process I had at the time. We don't want to make a mistake. And if it's that ambiguous, that's a huge call on the doctors to make. So the stages of development bothered me because I could see them really fluctuating from case to case. The other thing that really bothered me was the person who's taking on the abortion has to determine at what point along a streamlined line of development that this child's life had no value at one point, and then at this point now it has value. So the responsibility on the physician, the responsibility on the mother to say, okay, along this continuous path of development, there is this point at which you now have value. That's inconsistent with reality. If this is a stream of events that are in sequence and one process of development flows so smoothly into the next step of development, you cannot say at mile marker 8.5 weeks, now it's a life. It doesn't work with being ethically fair to the person or potential person you may take a life from. So that's too much responsibility on the doctor. That's too much responsibility on the mother. And I realized that a human life has value. And for someone to get charged with the right to determine at what point of their development their life has value, that line can be drawn anywhere. It could be drawn at birth. It could be drawn before birth. It could be drawn 10 minutes before death. You now have the power to determine how valuable someone's life is and at what point it, quote unquote, has value. So that to me was too much authority given to any one person. And it could be easily used in another way. Interestingly enough, my mother, I don't know why she did it, but she had me dive into a lot of books on the Holocaust. And I calculated very quickly that once a group of people determine that another group of people are less important or subhuman, really bad things can happen. And I saw the same thing happening with abortion. As soon as you have a precept made, there's a understanding amongst a group of people, even if the understanding doesn't have a lot of moral groundwork underneath it, moral foundation. If these group of people believe such and such, and they act on such and such, and they compromise the rights of the other people who are not in that group, anything goes. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the abortion saga. At first it was quickening, you couldn't abort after quickening. And then the stage at which you could abort, that line was just pulled further and further and further and further back, all the way to the point of birth, even after birth. And then it goes George Bush made partial birth abortion illegal. But that I knew that was going to happen. And we should be more concerned about keeping something like that from happening than pushing for the possibility of things running amok. One moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jacinta Robin is with us, and incredible what was going on there. The wheels were turning in all of these ways in Jacinta's life when she was only 16 and 17 years old. And there's a great witness there for people of any age who are struggling with some aspect of perhaps the moral teaching of the Catholic faith or any aspect of the Catholic faith. And they say, I think the Catholic faith is real. I have so much evidence that is telling me that this is the real deal, Jesus and his Catholic Church. And, I could just trace it back historically. I mean, there's so much logic to all of this, but this one thing, and whatever it might be, for a lot of people in our time, maybe it is abortion. For a lot of others in our time, maybe it is contraception, whatever it is. Whatever the evil that somebody is having a hard time understanding, why is this evil? I don't think that this seems that evil. I think this seems maybe good. And therefore, maybe I'm opposed to what the Catholic Church teaches on this. What's the right thing to do in that situation? It's a stance of humility. And to say, you know what? I'm going to look into this. I'm going to try to understand, okay, what is the Church saying? What are the facts here? Where is the evidence? I'm going to understand the argument before I would just reject it and say, okay, that's it. I'm not Catholic anymore. So Jacinta looked into it. And so Jacinta, again, all this is happening. You're 16, 17 years old. How did it end up? And what was the conclusion that you reached? And it must have been rather relieving to understand that, okay, yeah, I'm on the side of the Church once more.
Yeah, so after working through a lot of mental gymnastics scenarios, I was so uncomfortable with my original view, essentially my pro-choice view, that as long as it didn't look like a baby we could abort, I kind of did a 180 and realized that not only was it a really sketchy move to bring yourself to make a decision on someone else's potential value and determine what you can and can't do with a new life. I realized that a lot of people weren't doing the mental gymnastics. A lot of people weren't thinking hardly at all about this, and they were moving forward with abortion. And again, like I mentioned, the runaway train, I thought, if they're just they're just going to make a decision without really contemplating it, without really digging deep. What other major decisions are they going to make with that kind of frivolous mindset?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Yeah, Jacinta Robin, again, sharing a little bit about how she came around on understanding that it's a scientific fact that life begins at conception, fertilization. So that's when human life begins. And even though somebody might understand that scientific fact, they might still have a hang up or two to say, well, is abortion really that bad at a very early stage? After all, it's just single cell human being. It doesn't seem so important, right? But guess what? We were all that size once. We were all that single cell human being. That's when we began. All we needed from there was time and nutrition, and we would continue to grow if there were no unfortunate impediments or obstacles, which do sometimes happen. If none of those things occurred and just naturally we continue to have nourishment and time, we would grow and develop in the womb as we ought to, right? With a completely distinct DNA from our mother, a completely distinct DNA from our father, from that very first moment of conception, fertilization as that single cell human being. We were all that size once. And if somebody would have killed us at that point, then they would have killed us, right? But that's when we first began to exist. So I think this is really important that this topic is coming out today in Jacinta's testimony, because how many are there, even within the Catholic Church, who, when they're being honest, they might say, hey, I'm pro-life, but maybe not all the way, right? Maybe not all the way to what the church teaches, which is a simple affirmation of the science. Life begins at conception, fertilization. That's a scientific fact. And then the foundational moral truth that we ought not kill any innocent human beings, no matter what their size, no matter what their age. And we also are called to love. We are called to love every human being, that there is an inherent value in our very existence, no matter how small, no matter what age or level of development or anything else, right? And so we want to turn the hearts of moms to their children to love them. We don't want a society that's going to say, hey, you got a problem, let's go take care of it. No, this is a human being worthy of love. It ought to be illegal in law. It ought to be unthinkable in culture. We got to keep working to get it there. More with Jacinta when we get back. Stay tuned.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. Nebraska has passed new legislation banning pain-capable abortions after 12 weeks gestation. Sponsors of the Preborn Child Protection Act settled on a 12-week ban after one Republican senator blocked a 6-week heartbeat abortion ban. FBI whistleblowers had their day before Congress, telling how they faced harrowing ordeals after approaching FBI oversight officials over problems in FBI field offices. Congressman Jim Jordan leads a committee investigating FBI overreach, including actions against pro-life activists. Senator Tommy Tuberville's efforts to overturn White House military abortion plans are gaining momentum. More Republican senators are signing on to delay or deny senior military appointments and commissions. This is Life News Radio. A culture of life has a rarely mentioned but very formidable enemy. Pornography is material that deceives its consumers into thinking that they possess beauty, while the reality is they are possessed by a lie. The first step may be to talk openly with your pastor or confessor, reject the lie, and recognize that a culture of life relies upon you. In other stories, there will soon be two candidates for president from South Carolina. Senator Tim Scott will soon join former governor and UN ambassador Nikki Haley in the 2024 presidential race. With pro-life Governor Glenn Youngkin calling for greater abortion restrictions, state Democrats are rolling out plans to make Virginia an abortion tourism state. And further examination of Planned Parenthood's annual report released earlier this month shows the lowest non-abortion care ever. Record-breaking declines in services like cancer screenings are matched by record-breaking federal funding. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Jacinta Robin, sharing some of her personal testimony on this Testimony Tuesday. Jacinta is a full-time pro-life activist with the Center for Bioethical Reform. She's also been active in the pro-life movement since she was 17. And again, that's what we've been digging into so far in the show, at least the last segment, really digging into what was going on in Jacinta's life that led her to getting active in the pro-life movement at the age of 17. So, Jacinta, you had a lot to work out and you did that wrestling. You came out on the other side of it and you said, all right, I'm going to dive into this pro-life work. What does that look like? What did that look like for you at the age of 17? And we'll use the second half of the show. You can kind of lead us into that, connect the dots to all the great work you're doing now as well. Go ahead.
So much. So after I made a resolution that this was going to be my thing, I didn't know really where to start. At my college, I don't know how this happened, but there were some pamphlets for 40 Days for Life in the college. And it's very rare to get clearance for pro-life materials to just be out in the cafeteria. So I stumbled on this, and I knew it had nothing to do with anything pro-life related, and it was about standing outside of abortion clinics and praying. So I learned about 40 Days for Life, and I got connected to the pro-life community in Jacksonville, Florida, through the 40 Days for Life chapter. After that, I learned so much about the movement. I learned that there were all these different organizations and that they were all pushing back on the abortion narrative, on the abortion wave in different ways. So some were taking the political route and vetting politicians, vetting policies like the Right to Life chapters. Some were taking more of an aggressive method of educating the public, like the organization that I work with. We go out to college campuses and we present the reality of abortion to college students. There are chapters like Students for Life, which gave a very hands-on, very user-friendly means of getting involved in the pro-life movement, especially if you've never done it before and you're just getting your feet wet. You want to know how to be approachable. You want to know how to pull more people that kind of are on the fence on the issue over to the side of being a supporter of life. Students for Life has done a great job of doing that. So what began as a horrible mistake, which was the embracing of Roe versus Wade and really any legislation that enshrined abortion within the various states, actually forced a movement that I've never seen anything like before. I've gone to the March for Life several times, and it's just so powerful to see that many people together for any positive issue. But for abortion, I don't know of any march that's the size of the ones that are for life. I don't know of any marches that come out in any way, shape, or form that match what the March for Life delivers in January, when marchers come out and march around the White House. And now, because of the reversal of Roe, they take a different route. They march in front of, I think they used to march past the Capitol, but they're reorienting their route because they realize that now we're not dealing with the issue of Roe. Now we're dealing with the states. We need the states to be on our side. We need the states to pass pro-life legislation. And, but they're taking 500,000 people plus and telling them now, we need you to focus your attention here. And that's amazing to watch, footballs upon footballs, fields of people doing something together. It's very American. And for that evidence of who we are as a public, as an American people, to be oriented towards the fight for life, I think that's powerful. And that needs to be honed in, and people need to see that. This is not a frivolous battle. And just the sheer numbers of the organizations that are around right now doing their part to push back on this issue show that we want it to go away, and we're not going to stop until it does. And that's a force. That's a real momentum that should be respected, even by the opposition, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jacinta Robin, tell us, share with us a little bit about your work now with the Center for Bioethical Reform, and then we can always loop back and kind of connect some dots afterwards. But I want to make sure to give a generous amount of time for you to be just able to share what you're doing now and help people to understand the importance of the work for the group that you're with, Center for Bioethical Reform.
Yeah, so CBR actually came to my campus when I was going to FIU in Miami in 2011. And I saw them come out with these huge displays, their Genocide Awareness Project, which essentially compares abortion to genocide. And when I saw the photos, they're very provocative, they're very graphic, and they show different genocides along the era. We show the Holocaust, we show Rwanda, and we show abortion. And we equate abortion to the previous genocides, actually arguing this is one of the worst genocides that's ever been inflicted on humanity because of the numbers. And so I, like many students I encounter now doing this work, I was appalled. I said, this is not how you get the conversation started on abortion. You're going to push people away. I'm the most pro-life person on this campus, okay? I've done the work. I know where I should be on this issue, but this is not the way to do it. That was my belief the first time I encountered the Genocide Awareness Project. But the next day, I was volunteering for them. So it took a good 24 hours to sit and digest the materials that were given to me, and kind of humble myself and realize that, kind of going back to the drawing board again, if it's a life, if it's a human life, if that life is being taken with no respect, no regard for its value, and if it's done through a brutal procedure, you are now dealing with genocide at the numbers that this is taking place by. So we're dealing with the erasure of human life for arbitrary reasons, massive amounts, and it's done heinously. What else would you call that? That by definition is a genocide. No, we can't see it. We can't hear their silent scream. But every year, United States loses 1 million people roughly to abortion. The world loses roughly 56 million people every single year. The populations are indeed declining because of efforts through abortion. So I don't know what else you would call it. And again, that wrestling had to take place the night after I thought about what was happening on the campus with this group that came out and showed all these really ugly pictures. But I wanted to hone in on that courage that they showed by coming to the campus and stirring up the crowd and being willing to face tough questions and tough people for this cause. And I said to myself, that's the way you should do it. I mean, it's wrong to hide the truth. If you can show people what's actually happening is wrong. And that's what I do now when I go to campuses and I tell students, I said, if the Holocaust was happening right now and we had Holocaust pictures, would you be opposed to what we were doing? And they really wrestle with that question because right now that the Holocaust is over and everyone's on one side on the issue, we all think it was wrong. Of course, we want the truth to be exposed. But the Holocaust happening right now is abortion, and there's still debate on the issue. And so not everybody can agree that showing the truth of abortion is a good, but in my opinion, it is. So when I saw these images and I learned about this organization, I finally came around that this was probably the good way to go about it. I reached out and I said, I want to work with you guys. Well, the organization founder didn't want me to work with it until I finished school and got my degree out of the way and took care of life a little bit. So I kept pestering over the years. And then finally I was recruited and now I run the summer intern program and I teach college students and young adults how to be pro-life activists, how to be bold, how to go out, how to have tough conversations, how to show the world what's happening with these poor children in the womb being aborted and how to not back down. my interns, I've learned that as much as the United States was founded on this idea that I want to live my own life and be free and be sovereign, we're not really teaching our young people how to be bold in their beliefs. If anything, the group that got it right now is the last group you'd want to get it right as far as being bold and determined in their beliefs. That would be the groups that are pushing very, very, I would argue, regressive, not progressive ideas. But they don't back down. They're very determined. They're very strong, presenting what it is that they believe in. But for those of us who kind of find ourselves on the more conservative side, we're just not trained in that skill. But you'll learn by doing activism work, you can't help but be bold. You can't help but be grounded in where you stand and be willing to face a challenge. And that's what we train our interns to do over the summer. And by the end of the summer, they're willing to take on a lion. Like, they are not afraid of anything, and they look forward to encountering the public as opposed to feeling like that's something out of their comfort zone. And I'm really happy to be a part of that. And I encourage other groups to consider incorporating skills on confronting the public, because it's a lost art these days.
Yes, outstanding. Yes, Jacinta Robin, she's a pro-life activist with the Center for Bioethical Reform, CBR, the website abortionno.org. And I mean, what you're saying, I know that it's true. I have this similar personal experience of stepping out in pro-life work out of authentic love for God and for neighbor. These are our littlest brothers and sisters, the most innocent person you could possibly imagine, the most vulnerable. If we're not called to step out in authentic love for them, then who are we called to love? It doesn't make any sense. Of course we are. Of course, when Jesus says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do it unto me. But yet so many are missing it, even in the Catholic Church. They might say I'm pro-life, but they're not really getting it. We're all so desensitized to the reality. And so when you lay out the analogy, what if the Holocaust were going on right now? And guess what? It is going on right now. What are you doing about it? Is it even on your mind day to day? Are you truly praying about it? Are you truly taking action about it? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we are far from where we ought to be. And this is not just young people. This is older people as well. So everything that you're saying about young people, it applies to the older ones as well, to parents, to grandparents. I think it all comes down to a Bishop Sheen quote who says it better than I ever could. And this is one that comes up often for me. This is what he said. He said, the refusal to take sides on great moral issues is itself a decision. It is a silent acquiescence to evil. The tragedy of our time is that those who still believe in honesty lack fire and conviction, while those who believe in dishonesty are full of passionate conviction. End of quote. I think that's the point Jacinta was going to make. We're about to hit a break, and when we get back, I'm going to ask Jacinta to give us some tips, teach us up. How can we be bolder? Help us to be educated in what we need to connect. How do we connect the dots in our own hearts and minds so that we can step out with greater boldness, with greater zeal, with authentic love, that fire of authentic love that we are called to have, especially we who call ourselves Catholic, who are feeding on the very body and blood of our Lord? How can we be passive? How can we be inactive when our littlest brothers and sisters, made in the image and likeness of God, are being murdered by the thousands every single day in our backyard, on our watch, just in the U.S. alone, hundreds of thousands worldwide every day? This ought to be something that wakes us up. It should be life-changing to us if we see it. We might have a lot of dreams and goals we'd like to pursue. We better put them aside. This is more important. We better dedicate our gifts and our abilities to this. This is the way that I see it. And so I propose that maybe it's the way we all ought to see it if we truly understand the value of human life and what's really going on. More with Jacinta Robin as soon as we get back. Stay tuned.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for May 23rd. Today we celebrate Pope St. Gregory VII. 3 evils plagued the church in the 10th and early 11th centuries. First was simony, the buying and selling of sacred offices and things. Second, the unlawful marriage of the clergy. And third, so-called lay investiture, whereby kings and nobles controlled the appointment of church officials. In 1049, Pope Leo IX brought a young monk named Hildebrand to Rome to be his counselor. Hildebrand directed his reformers' attention to all the problems facing the church. Eventually, he became Pope himself, taking the name Gregory VII. For 12 years, Gregory was a busy pope, fiercely resisting any attack on the liberty of the church. For this he suffered and finally died in exile in 1085. 30 years later, the church won its struggle against lay investiture. The Gregorian Reform, a milestone in the history of the church, was named after this man who tried to free the papacy and the whole church from undue control by civil rulers. Gregory reasserted the unity of the church based on Christ and expressed in the successors of St. Peter. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTagg, your daily host of Catholic Current. Join me on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern to reconnect with Dr. Judge Glock of the Cicero Institute. We'll be talking about equal opportunity and affirmative action in employment. Don't they cancel each other out? How can the federal government support both goals? Find out on the Catholic Current on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Quick friendly reminder, we've got the National Men's March to Abolish Abortion Rally for Personhood coming up the first weekend of June. Less than 2 weeks away now. Getting close to it. We need you there. TheMen'sMarch.com for all the information. TheMen'sMarch.com. It starts with the men gathering at 9 a.m. Saturday, June 3rd in Albany outside the Planned Parenthood Killing Center. Going to have some prayers, some talks there. Then we're going to go on the march, about a 3-mile march down into the heart of Albany, the New York State Capitol. We're going to end up in the parking lot right in between the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception and the governor's mansion where pro-abortion New York State Governor Kathy Hochul resides. We're going to have a rally there, some speakers from 11 till 12 p.m. Then we're going to invite everybody to come on back to the Our Lady of Martyrs Shrine, where we're going to have a time of fellowship and a tour of the sacred grounds. We're going to have a holy hour, Eucharistic holy hour, confessions available, Holy Mass, also a men's retreat the night before for anybody who wants to come to that. Men, we need you there. Friday, June 2nd. But the rally is for everybody. So women, children, families, a very family-friendly event. We want the rally to include everybody in that beautiful vision of the men marching down into the rally at about 10:45 a.m. and the women there to receive them and everybody to come together for the rally. It's going to be a beautiful thing right there downtown Albany. Again, all the information at themensmarch.com. If it's at all possible, please come and be there with us on that day. There's a powerful opportunity. Step into it if you can and help us to spread the word. This is very, very grassroots. We need all the help we can spreading the word on this. Again, themensmarch.com. All right, back to our guest today. Final segment here with Jacinta Robin, full-time pro-life activist with the Center for Bioethical Reform, CBR, abortionno.org. Jacinta, final segment. I'm going to give you the floor to educate us, help us. I think it is the biggest need of our time that young people, old people, we've got a lack of fire. We've got a lack of boldness and a lack of zeal, particularly when it comes to loving our neighbor in the children in the womb that are being mass murdered every day. This is ongoing every single day, and it's kind of ho-hum, a lot of desensitization. Help us out.
Sure. So I believe the best thing you can do is, first of all, stop the bleeding. So women don't want abortions. I think it was Janet Morana who said, a woman wants an abortion like an animal wants to chew off their leg who's caught in a trap. Women do not want abortions. Support your local pregnancy center and let your schools know about those local pregnancy centers. Pregnancy centers are able to care for babies from the point of birth up to the point where they're 2 years of age. So a lot of women will say, I can't afford a child. Okay. Yes, you can. Your body is built to produce children, and society is going to help you raise that child. God doesn't make mistakes. If you're pregnant, it's because God allowed a child to be inside of you. So encourage women to be mothers. Don't tell them that a child is going to be the end of the world for them, and give them the resources they need to take care of their children. The other thing is we need to educate, especially young girls, what is happening inside of their body. I'm baffled by the limit of these quote unquote sex education courses in schools. I've called and I've asked, do you explain to these children what a pregnancy is like? They talk all about sex, but they don't talk about pregnancy. And they talk about, all these other forms of sexuality and homosexuality and you name it, but they're not talking about the end process of what happens, when egg and sperm meet. So I'm like, isn't that a bit cliffhangered? The girls know nothing about pregnancy. They know nothing about fetal development. They have no idea what's happening inside of them if they're pregnant. They know nothing about breastfeeding. They know nothing about motherhood. And we may have missed a lot of women who, unfortunately, I don't want to call it brainwashing, but they've been told from such a young age that they have the right to do what they want with their body, including the baby that's developing inside of them that's somehow their body. We have to re-educate our girls. We have to show them that, yes, it's inside of your body, but it's a distinct body. Now you're responsible for that little being inside of you. And what you do can have a big impact on that little child. It's interesting. They're not allowed to drink or smoke while you're pregnant, but you can have an abortion, right? And they say, oh my goodness, drinking and smoking will harm the baby. Well, abortion will too. Okay. I don't know where the cognitive disconnect is with women who are carrying babies and them not recognizing that they're carrying a new distinct life. And I think a lot of that is because society has lied to them, telling them that they're carrying a blob of tissue. And to get out of an uncomfortable situation quickly, it's easy to grab onto that definition, eliminate the problem, and move on. But one lie is feeding another lie. It's not a blob of tissue. You're not going to be able to get rid of this quickly. You're going to think about your abortion for the rest of your life. And as far as moving on, that just comes down to how easy it is for you to push this bad event out of your head. And most women have an incredible hard time doing that. We can't lie to our girls, and we can't lie to our men. Our men cannot go and do whatever they want. We don't get pregnant on our own. A lot of this just comes down to bedrock responsibility, being accountable, and being aware of what's happening. Our organization, we are helping the public understand what exactly is happening in the womb by sharing scientific content. National Geographic did a series on prenatal development. Another group called ERF.Science, that's ERF.Science, they took it up a whole notch. You can see these babies in the womb at 4 weeks, 5 weeks with hands and feet and legs and arms. These are not blobs of tissue. We have to re-educate the public on what exactly is happening in the womb. We have the science and the technology to do that. It is a lie that you're expelling nothing when you have an abortion. That is a lie. You're getting rid of a tiny human being, and we need the public to be aware of that. So education and connecting people in need with the proper resources. We have to get rid of the stigma that a child is a parasite, that pregnancy is a disease, that you are not capable of being the mother that God obviously knew you're capable of by allowing you to be pregnant in the first place, that fathers are not capable of being good fathers because they're not in a position to quote unquote raise a child. You spawned a child. You can do it. We can help you. That is what the church is for. That is what government agencies are for, that are providing resources to these women and fathers in crisis. We have to take advantage of that. We have to redefine the child in the womb. And that comes through education, and that comes through mentorship, and fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terrific. Yeah, if somebody wants to help out in the good work that you're doing there with CBR, Center for Bioethical Reform, abortionno.org, what can they do? How can they help with your work with your particular organization?
Sure. So 2 ways. That's my number today. You can go to our website and you can donate. Abortionno.org. We have a donate button at the top. Everything helps, and it's allocated to the trips that we do, getting out to college campuses and getting the message out. Our organization has been inactive for 30 years. We are very grounded in the work that we do. Whenever we're challenged in courts, we always win because we take very good care of the work that we do. We want to make sure that we're doing it according to the law and in good principle and in good faith. So donate. The second thing you can do is tell people about the reality of abortion. Make our job easier. Help us get these truths out there. These uncomfortable truths, they just have to be shared, and that's how the killing stops.
Yeah. Jacinta Robin, thank you so much for being with us. Again, her website and blog, realitysustained.com. Also her YouTube channel, Reality Sustained. And again, CBR's website, abortionno.org. If you are a college student, reach out to them, abortionno.org. Start thinking about next year in the fall semester, getting that GAP project there, Genocide Awareness Project, to your college campus. If you know college students, help them to know about this, abortionno.org. This has to happen more and more in our communities. Thank you so much. God bless you all.